Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, dear students. I'm glad to be back. There's a number of my students there in the audience, and a number of them I don't even know. But I'll see you at the beginning of the next century. Yeah. So welcome to this first debate in this season. I'm very happy to see such a crowd. It doesn't happen every time, each and every time. The debate motion tonight is this House would introduce universal basic income, UBI. We will hear it a lot, UBI, UBI. The talk of UBI has gained quite a momentum over the past few years, and some of you must have noticed that. And some of you probably also know that right now it is particularly a particularly topical issue in Switzerland. And with you being young people at the age of economic crisis, young people in the country where the unemployment rate among the young is 25%, which is quite unprecedented, I would imagine that UBI is something that you would go instinctively for. Like, if you would object to finding a few €100 on their bank account every month, regularly, no strings attached, no questions asked, that sounds kind of lovely, I guess. On the other hand, it's not that simple, it tends to be complex, as usual, and tonight's debate should reveal part of this complexity. One question is UBI a matter of, or is this a question of, is it a human right, actually? Or is it a mechanism, is it a tool that we could use to diminish this unseemly, obscene division between the rich and poor? Or is it something quite different? Is it ethically questionable? Is it something that would make, if implemented, would it discourage people from being cooperative, from being contributing members of society, or not? And once actually implemented, it's even more complex, I guess, and they will reveal part of that complexity tonight, not all of it. So before we start, just a few things. Those who are older students, you know that usually we went along certain lines that we would like to change slightly in the future. One thing that is a big change for tonight is we are not interested in the winner. I will not have you vote for the winner after the debate. What I would like you to do is first answer my initial question. So, do you instinctively go in favor of UBI, or do your instincts suggest that this is perhaps a fishy subject, that there's something suspicious about it? And I would like you to raise your hands. Or are you sitting on the fence? You don't know how to decide. Whichever. And then after each round of two talks, two speeches, I will repeat the question once again, just to monitor the change of opinion and what's happening in your heads, what are you thinking of. So, do you think this is a great idea? Raise your hands. Well, you can point to this direction, it can be more fun. Okay, that's for yes and that's for no. Raise your hands, those people who think that this would be actually good, this is your basic human right, or just human right. This could be a social equalizer. Ready.
Yeah, but that's your
Not very many. Surprise. Okay, undecided. More people undecided. Okay. Instinctively suspicious of it. Good. That's good. That's nice. All right.
So the odds are in our favor, right?
Yeah. Okay, I think we've just reached the point where I should introduce our debaters. So, welcome students, welcome my colleagues, welcome debaters. Tonight, I think this is something that we've never had before. Four Slovene debaters, all of them from the Faculty of Arts. Yeah. opposition are Slovenes. The second government and the second opposition are all Americans. First government, Barbara, are you Prime Minister?
Yeah.
Can you please stand up and show your face? There are a lot of first year students around. Barbara, she is from the Department of Translation.
Yeah.
So she'll be Prime Minister. Her Deputy Prime Minister, Zoran, another translator, future translator. Okay, Leader of Opposition, Petra. Department of English. Yeah. Okay, and Deputy Leader, Theo, Sociology and Philosophy. We know him. Now our guests are all from the University of Vermont, and they are members of Lawrence Debate Union Squad. Their coach is Professor Snyder. Some of you met him last Thursday, remember? On the side of the government, second government, Luke, are you a member of Parliament? Yeah, Luke. A lovely chap. He studied economics and political science, and he's very good at playing sax, jazz. Dylan. Dylan is a student of comparative religion and English. Opposition, the member of opposition, Jacob. Jacob studies biology and political science. And Franny, the only woman among the American contingent, Franny studies history. Is it European history, Franny? European history and political science. Okay, I think we are ready now. I'll be the timekeeper. With no further ado, I'm calling the Prime Minister to explain the concept and start the debate. Thank you, Barbara.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, current political system as it functions with the market is creating continuously wealth inequality. And this wealth inequality leads to social justice. And this is exactly the problem that we are facing today. And this is exactly the problem that we're going to solve for you today. It seems that nowadays the government simply isn't able to propose any efficient corrective measures to counteract the market. And we see that the system of social benefits that we have right now really isn't working. Because we have people who, despite receiving social benefits or even being employed, do simply not have enough money, enough means to survive. We see that this is a problem. And we see that it comes from this relation between the current political system and the market. Because the market says the government should not intervene. The government shouldn't do anything. If you fail, it's your fault. We disagree with that. We think that everyone should have the possibility to lead a decent life. Not a life where you every day have to fight to have bread on your table, but a life where you actually have opportunities to also do something else. And we believe that this system is only possible under the proposal that we're bringing you today. Because the fact is that the number of rich people is getting higher and higher, and the number of those who are less well off is also getting higher and higher. And the middle class is actually in the situation we have nowadays disappearing. And that's pretty problematic because we've always been told that the middle class is one of the main conditions for a stable society. So when we see it disappearing, we see that it will create a lot of problems. So what we propose today is the implementation of so-called universal basic income. Universal basic income is going to be an amount of money that each and every citizen will receive every month. And this amount of money will enable you and other citizens a decent life. This is what we want to stress. It means a decent life. It doesn't mean barely able to survive, as it is in nowadays system, but actually getting an amount of money. Let's say, for example, we will give them like 500 euros, and with that, the people will be able to do whatever they want. Because what we're doing, in a second, what we're doing is we're replacing the current system of social benefits, which means that unemployment benefits, child benefits, scholarships, healthcare benefits. All of that will now be replaced by this universal basic income. Yes.
As we have seen in the example of the United States of America, when people have the option and have to actively opt into a medical health care, they're less likely to do it than under the current model where it's automatic. How will people decide by themselves have a better health care for themselves?
We think that at the end of the day, those are the people need to decide. If I want to have health care, I will have it. If I feel that there are more important things, I won't have it. It seems that the majority of Americans think it should be their choice whether they want to be insured or not, and we think that this is completely legitimate. But what we are interested in is that they will have the money to pay for this healthcare insurance if they decide to do so. We think that this proposal that we are presenting you today is completely feasible and it's completely credible, because as you already heard, right now, no thank you, there was a referendum in Switzerland where the people actually decided they want their government to consider the possibility of introducing universal basic income. Because what we believe today, and our main idea is that actually it's going to result in a better society for every individual. Because as I said at the beginning, a lot of people nowadays struggle to actually to make the ends meet. They do not have enough money in the current system of social benefits to actually survive. This hinders them for participating fully in the society, to improve their potential, because all their energy and all their attention goes into how will I be able to survive this month. And we say that this, at the end of the day, is not good for our society, because it means that people are frustrated, because it means that people are depressed, because they simply cannot survive in a system that we have right now. So what we do is actually we provide them with the means to survive, and not just to survive, but to lead a decent life. And what we're saying is that in this way, we are actually giving them more opportunities. We are actually making them a better and a more active member of our society. And we feel that this is exactly what we want. We want people who are able to fully live out their potentials and not be all the time consigned in this idea that they need to first think of where will I get 2 euros to buy bread for tomorrow. Therefore, we feel that our proposal leads to a better society for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your fine speech, and I'm inviting the Leader of Opposition to take the floor.
We have two extremes in our society. We have those at the top of the social ladder, and then we have those at the very bottom. What the social intervention under the status quo does is that it tries to level up the field for those at the very bottom and push them further up in our society through housing vouchers, unemployment benefits, single parenthood benefits, etc., etc. We're trying to make those at the very bottom, the worst off, more full members of our society, to be more engaged and able to to participate in our society more. What they do under their proposal, by implementing the basic universal income, they take the same wealth gap, they don't close it, they just move it further up the scale in our society. They keep the same power structures, the same stereotypes, and the same discrimination in place. And it does not help these people at the very bottom to close the wealth gap and move further up and get a better life for themselves. I'm going to show you in my argument how the system as we have it right now benefits individuals much more than it would under their proposal. But first, let me just tackle two of the points. So Barbara said that the problem with our situation is that we have a political system that is entirely obedient to the needs of the market, and that this creates social inequality, which then leads to social injustice. And we say, so how does it exactly help to take the state entirely out of the equation and leave individuals entirely in the hands of the market. Because this is what the proposal does, right? It obliterates all the state intervention because it takes away the social services, it takes away the state structures of tackling social discrimination, and it leaves the individuals to the market. It says to them, you have 500 euros here right now, and then use it to the best of your benefit. Make the most out of it on your own without our help. This is what it does. There's more market, there's less state. We don't see how this helps individuals that are struggling with the market as it is already. Second point is that she says that, well, but now they will have a choice at least. And we are saying choice is not a value in itself if it leads to worse outcomes. Giving individuals a choice is a false ideology of our society. We don't want to support this decision if the individuals will be worse off in the long run. As Thea already stressed in the POI, and this leads me basically to my first argument. People, when there's automatic opt-in, they have social security, they have social benefits. When they have to actively sign up for social services, pay into the pension fund, they're less likely to do it, which ultimately leads to worse life in the long run. Zoran.
If you give 500 euros to a poor person compared to a rich person, the poor person will disproportionately increase his or her quality of life compared to a rich person.
Okay, now I'm going to show you how this is not true and how the current system really benefits individuals on a micro level first. How? Firstly, it provides these automatic structures that I already mentioned, which lead to more people having security. Right now, a sum of money, a portion of my money that I get through social services is automatically relegated into healthcare, into pension funds, which in the end leave me with a better life when I'm older. Secondly, the social services that I sign up for teach me certain skills. They have the knowledge and they have the know-how to retrain me to get the necessary skills I need to have to enter the job market. When Bob, a single parent with 3 kids, sign up for the social security, he doesn't know why he can't get a job for the past 5 years. And now the social security, with all the data, with all the knowledge they have, can realize what is his problem and send him on a training program that will get him transferable skills and retrain him to become better suited to the needs of the market. And my last point is how all this data that we amass through the social services and then we crunch and talk about and discuss, it essentially leads to better policy making on a larger scale. It leads to a better society. How? Miriana mentioned that 25% of young people are currently unemployed. But we wouldn't know that if we wouldn't have Social Security getting all this info, trying to tackle the issues, identifying the areas that needed to be improved and worked on. We can realize through social services, through collecting the data, which areas have more youth unemployment, which areas have more unemployment among the black population. And then in turn, we can implement policies such as quotas, such as positive discrimination, that are specifically suited to the needs of the worst off, of the ones that are most discriminated against. If we take all these structures away, we are going to be left on our own, everyone against everyone else, everyone against the market. We don't see how, without the knowledge, without the skills, without the financial savvy, that the ones that are the worst off in our society just don't have, we don't see how throwing $500 at them are going to make their lives in any way better. That is why we are extremely against the implementation of the UBI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petra. Now, as promised, any changes of heart? Yes? No? Not decided. Who's in favor of? Who's still in favor of? Or who's changed his mind? How many people are in favor of UBI? Is it fewer?
Definitely.
Okay, undecided. Still haven't made up your mind. Oh, okay, that's the vast majority. Surprise, surprise. Against it? Roughly the same number, I would say. Okay. You're kindly asked to proceed. So, Deputy Prime Minister Zoran, will you take the floor? You're ready.
I can conclude that we pretty much all agree here that we have a problem of social inequality and basically the polarization of the world into the wealthy elite and the hordes of the poor people. But we are just arguing about approaches here. But I'll still argue that the universal basic income is actually the approach that will help remedy this devastation caused by the current markets. However, at this point, I would like to ask the side of opposition to actually explicitly tell us what they actually stand for as an alternative. Are they simply proposing the status quo, which is obviously dysfunctional, and they agree that it is dysfunctional, or are they proposing something else, or are they standing for nothing? This is something you would really like to hear in order to have a quality level debate. Now, having said that, I would like to just point out a few points of refutation, so to answer to their arguments, and then I'll explain to you how we actually actively combat discrimination by implementing the universal basic income. So to the first point of refutation, how we do not change the gap between the rich and the poor. As I pointed out in my question, we do change the relations of power between the rich and the poor. 500 euros will increase the quality of life for a poor person far more than they will increase the life quality of a rich person. If you only earn $500 per month, then this additional 500 will actually double your income. However, in the case of rich people, it will only, like if they earn $5,000 per month, it will only increase their wages by about, or income by about 10%. So we see that this policy does disproportionately benefit the poor, and that their actually ideas simply don't stand. Sure.
So people that are currently on food stamps and enjoying all the other benefits are now going to get a lump sum of money. How can you assume that they're going to know how to use it to their best advantage?
I'd actually like to explain this right now. Now, here comes their second idea, that we're actually commodifying everything and leaving everyone up to the market. First of all, this is not necessarily what we are trying to say. We are trying to assume to you that you will still have the same structure as we have today, only that instead of actually paying for the people, we'll simply give the people to the money and let them pay themselves. Yes. And further on, they never really showed us this bad impact of this idea of commodification. What we say is that to a certain extent, under the once we remove the state from the market, what will happen, and it is already happening, is that you have a flourishing of social entrepreneurship companies and charities, which actually do to some extent take the state or the role of the state, and also are far better at innovating and actually doing some very risky stuff that the state usually doesn't do. Further on, we believe it's very patronizing to assign to a person, you must use and eat this kind of food, you must live in this kind of a house, and you have to educate yourself in this kind of way. We believe that we have to restore the sense of dignity and the sense of integrity to the poor people if we are to empower them and to return them to the labor market. But let's return to my constructive point, how we actively combat discrimination. We say that universal basic income reduces the social barriers to working again. No, thank you. Now, we believe that one main idea of this policy here is the idea of universality. Now, this basic income is a civil right, it's something everyone receives compared to the social benefits we have right now. For example, specifically employment benefits. Employment benefits are special benefits for special people who are seen as not being able or not willing to contribute back to society. And this leads to discrimination, this leads to resentment against the poor. Now imagine you have a neighbor on social benefits. While you wake up at 7 a.m. to work, he or she can sleep. When you come to home and actually have to do the housekeeping, the poor person was able to do it already because he's on social benefits and is now able to play and hang out with his or her family, right? And this leads to resentment and discrimination on the topics of unemployment. And this has several impacts. First of all, you have potential employers who look down upon the poor, reducing the possibilities of economic reintegration and finding actually another job. Second of all, you have the local community discriminating against the poor, simply shrinking these cycles of information the poor have and the available resources they have. And also, on the political level, you're actually allowing politicians to ignore the poor because people do not generally dislike them, or actually use this anti-poor rhetoric in order to leverage support for themselves. And this is something that must end and that will end if we implement this policy, because then everyone will be at the same level, getting the same benefits, and nobody will be marked as a black sheep who should be simply left out in the cold. This is why we should accept this policy. Thank you.
Welcome, Theo.
I'm not sure about you, but if Paco stood up, or Bratushko stood up and said, oh, here's 500 euros, I'm making something good for you, I would be very distrusting if they just said society is going to be better because I get a paycheck, right? So I think we need to consider what the power structures behind this issue are. Because Zoran says, oh, but relations are going to change, people can have a dignified life. Yes, because the current issue is that people don't have a dignified life. Not that 400 people have more wealth in America than the other 314 million people. These are the differences we're talking about, and 500 euros a month more will not change that difference. And I'm going to tell you more about this in my argument, which is going to be how the UBI prevents social change from happening, and is just a bandage on a fracture. Before I do that, certain ideas which are misconceived popped up, right? First is this idea of changing relations, and we told you the differences between the wealthiest and the poorest are too big to be changed by such a small policy. Secondly, if we want to talk about change relationship, let's talk about the other areas which are not covered under their model. If I'm a poor person growing up in a ghetto, I will not go to a good school, even if I get 500 euros more a month. I will not be the rich guy from Manhattan who can afford an Ivy League education because of these 500 euros a month. I will not be capable of investing into my future and making my life a better prospect in comparison to others. Which means I am not making my life that much better, I'm just changing the shade in which discrimination happens. So we think they're misconceived. Second point, they say, oh, we're patronizing the poor because we're telling them what kind of cereal they have to eat. No, we're saying, if you're 18 without a retirement scheme, that's bad for you. Fact. We say to you, if you just fractured your leg and you can't go to a hospital because you didn't invest in a health security and in insurance, that's bad for you. Fact. Just because some people, because they have 500 euros a month and they have to decide, oh, with 500 euros I need to pay for, food and cars and something else, therefore I will not put it in health insurances, that doesn't mean that they're making a bad choice, they're making a, how would you say that? A forced choice upon themselves. Because if you're rich, you can have all of those and social security and health insurance, which they're taking away from the people. So we're not patronizing, they're actually misconceived as to what the problem of the poor people are, and we'd like them to step up. But they say, oh, but there is a stigma of the lazy worker who doesn't work. Because we know that people on social welfare, they don't want to work. We don't see how the stigma changes under their proposal. All that's going to happen is people are still going to believe some people are just taking away from the government and they're giving nothing back. So what is going to be the criterion to determine who the lazy people are? There are going to be other stereotypes which are not being tackled. The single mom, oh, she's the one who steals from the government. The black person from the ghetto, oh, they're the one who steals from the government. And if we do not have policies which change the stereotypes and discrimination in society, we will not change the stigma which will be present in their model as well. But before I go into more to tell you what the possible social change could be, I would like to hear from second position. Do you have any questions, any points of information?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Luke.
So poor people are currently ignored in the political system because of a lack of resources. Why does the status quo solve for this?
We're not saying the status quo solves for this, and it's not on us the burden of proof to tell you what the perfect model is, communism. But what we're saying is, we're discussing this policy and whether this policy works. And given the standards you put here, which is better social justice, we see that your policy fails on that criterion. And on that criterion, we would like to step up to the game and show us how you implement social justice, because you're just making it worse.
Here.
To tell you more about this, let's go to my argument, which is how does the UBI prevent social change? And we think all it does is hush money. Why? Because there is intrinsic power structures within our society. I told you about the 400 versus 314 million people, the difference, right? So if I'm a rich elite, what can I do to influence society to make it the way I want it, not the way the poor people want it? Well, I have something called super PACs in America. I sponsor the politician which I want, who will pass the laws which benefit me to make me even richer, and therefore it's going to make it happen for me. Living the dream. What can the poor person do? Exactly. So, what other alternative is there? Lobbying in Europe. And we say, oh, but lobbying is not that bad. Well, let us see what happened last month. The European Parliament retracted its own anti-smoking law because the tobacco industries lobbied against it. So they retracted their own idea because of lobbying, which means that the elites are fostering their own vision of the society in the future because they have so much wealth in comparison to the rich, which means social change needs to happen. So why is the UBI dangerous when it comes to social change? Because all social change is driven by dissatisfaction. And if we give the poor people something which helps them quiet, something which tells them, oh, but now you're fat, all we take away is their dissatisfaction, which can lead to societal change, which can lead to the society which is not going to be intrinsically disstratified when it comes to power relations. And all we're doing with the UBI is give hush money while keeping the causes of the problem hidden. We're putting a bandage on a fracture, and we will not stand for that. If we want social justice, we have to take away the cause of the social justice, which is the intrinsic stratification of society between the rich and the poor, and not just tell to the poor, now you can buy a better brand of cereal. Thank you.
You're loving it? Are they too fast? No? Yes? Slow down? No? Say something. No, super, it's just me. Okay. Right. So, how many people are still undecided? Yep, fewer. All right. Who's in favor of universal income? All right. Fewer. Who's against it? Many more, but there are some people who have not raised their hands. You're neither undecided nor for. Okay, there's so more round, 4 more speeches. Enough time for you to make up your mind, perhaps. All right, so Luke, the floor is yours. It's your time.
Member of Parliament.
Now, before I begin my speech, and I would appreciate it if people didn't start their timers yet, I would just like to say what an incredible privilege it is for the 4 of us to be here. It's like, I can't believe it, you know, that we're able to share your magnificent country, and additionally, that we had the privilege of having Mirjana with us for a little more than a semester last year, and what an incredible privilege that was, how much she taught us, and how great it is to see her again. So, really happy to be here, and, you know, let's do it.
Well done.
A life spent working, day in and day out, can be no life at all. Being impoverished keeps many people from participating in other parts of their society that makes their lives more meaningful. What I'm going to bring you today is why these people and how these people are going to be able to participate in more parts of their society, and how that's going to create the kind of social justice and progress that Teo thinks is impossible. Before I do that, I have 3 points of rebuttal. First, so we get this idea that personal choice will cause people to be worse off in the long run. People know what they need. They're not stupid. They have different needs that food stamps and healthcare may not solve. And liquid aid, real cash money, is more useful to these people who have very diverse needs, who may need more than just what the government is saying that they have. Additionally, this kind of aid allows them to engage in other areas of life, this is going to be my main point, and leads to real positive consequences in the long run. Second, the point that we get better policymaking because of the data that exists, because of the current social welfare program. So we see that with the use of UBI, there will be less need for these social services, and as a result, less need for the data. It puts people on a more level playing field, and as a result, we just don't need them as much. Third, this idea of hush money. The money actually is empowering people, and I'm going to get into this more, but what I'm really trying to say is that the system needs to be upended. It's really wrong. Both sides have conceded that, and we really need to change it entirely in order to provide social progress. I don't think that's communism, though. So otherwise, we do get these harms that Teo talks about. So let's get into it. So we want to put power back in the hands of the people, the power that's been taken away. So under the status quo, the poor are unable to escape their current situation. We see this as a cycle of poverty. They have to work to meet their basic needs. They have no other way to do it. We find some poor people working three jobs, working so long that they can't even see their families just to meet their basic needs, put food on the table. They lack an education to get good jobs because they have to work these long hours for low wages. And they don't have the time to get this education to make more money so that they can actually work less. Their children are born into the same cycle and it just repeats itself so that the same poor, same impoverished people continue to be impoverished generation in and generation out. So it's because we see on our side of the house that these people lack political access, that they are not able to really change the way that society works. So they're paid less attention to by their legislators. Their legislators have less incentive to actually pay attention to them. 2 reasons. First, impoverished people don't vote as much. Voting is expensive, okay? They have less time to vote because they have to work more jobs in order to meet these very basic needs. And they feel that they can't impact the system because they aren't paid off, because they aren't paid attention to by their legislators. Go ahead.
How does it help Bob if he can finally vote when all he can vote for is somebody else who spreads the ideology which helps the political and economic elites and not help Bob as a poor person?
See, but the thing is, Bob eventually is going to be able to stand up and say, you know what, my basic needs are being met now, and I have more time on my hands because I don't need to work 3 jobs. So maybe I'm going to run for government. Maybe I'm going to try to make the kind of change that I've always wanted to see. And that's how these people are eventually going to be empowered. I'm going to get into this, how this actually is going to work. So this second idea of how they are more paid attention to is that legislators under the status quo are looking specifically for support from special interests, and they enact policies that often are detrimental to impoverished interests in just to appease these special interests and really get the kind of campaign fund that they want. And additionally, having less time means that these people are more likely to be unaware of the candidates that they're voting for, even if they do vote. So if they're going to vote, that means that they're probably voting for someone who's not actually in their interest. So this lack of voting leads to a kind of disenfranchisement and the kind of ignorance by legislators that I talked about. So how does UBI solve this? UBI leads to more access. These people have more time to vote. They don't have to work as much to fill their basic needs. So they have more time to get involved in civil society. So we see that more voting means that they get paid attention to. They're more able to lobby for policies that benefit them. And they're more able to contribute to politicians who then have an incentive to actually pay attention to their needs. So how does this ameliorate the cycle of poverty? We see that more political access means more political support for impoverished interests. And we see that they're more able to support welfare programs because there's more money and they're better able to get an education. We've seen this be successful in the village of Omatara in Nairobi, where people actually, through one of these programs, child malnutrition rates dropped and education rates increased. For these reasons, we're extremely proud to propose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luke. Is it going to be Franny or Jacob? Jacob it is, member of opposition.
All right. What makes a society good isn't how it treats the rich, and isn't even how it treats the middle class. What makes a society good is how it treats those who are worse off in that society. So what would this policy do to Slovenian society, and what would it do to those who are worst off? And this question is what I'm really going to flesh out and really going to answer in my speech. Before I get there, I want to leave you with this thought. Is every member of Slovenian society a citizen of Slovenia? Now, before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about what Luke said, because he's got to have a lot of vodka in his pockets to say what he just said. So, he comes up here and says, if we hand people an extra 500 euros every month or whatever, that all of a sudden they're going to run for president, right? They're going to take it upon themselves to like change the world, to get out there and vote time and time again, because you know what? They have a few more bucks in their pocket, and that's what you do when you get a raise, right? You decide to run for prime minister. Except for no one actually does this. When you get a little bit more money, I don't know, you spend it on food or spend it like buying new clothes, because you know that's what most people want. Like most people don't get a raise and say, I'm going to run for office. That's just not paying attention to individuals and how people think. Now, what does this do to the worst off members of Slovenian society? And I think we have to remember that these are not Slovenian citizens. These are probably migrant workers who come here because they don't have much of a future where they come from, who come here like without people they know in an alien city that they do not like, and they are very vulnerable to the system taking control of them, to the system forcing them to take a job that's bad and a low-paying job. The reason this happens is for three things. One, they're outside of their home community. They don't know anyone here. This is a new country. Secondly, they don't know the city. They don't know many people, they don't know many places, and it's difficult to live in a place you do not understand. And three, they don't have the support they have in their homeland. They don't have the support of friends and families living in your community who are able to back you up. This means that if something goes wrong to Alamir, who has just moved here and is trying to get a job, that he has no one to turn to for help. He has no friends, he has no family who can help him out. And this makes him incredibly vulnerable to society in ways that a Slovenian citizen can probably never understand. Secondly, they tend not to have as much money as the average Slovenian. That's why they come here. They think Slovenia will be a better life for them. They come here because they don't see much of a future for them where they come from. Secondly, they tend to work low-paying jobs. No thanks. This is because that when there are two people trying to get the same job, often employers will go for the people named Teo over the people named Alamir. The same thing happens in the United States. People will hire someone named Peter over someone named Juan because this is how human beings act. This is the ugly side of human psychology. People preference individuals who are more like them over the outsider and the foreigner. This forces migrant workers down the pay scale. This forces them into lower paying jobs under Slovenian citizens. Thirdly, they have no political power. These migrant workers will never get the chance to vote in a Slovenian election. These migrant workers will never have their voices heard, and they never interact with the politics that they think will solve everything. So, yes.
The migrant workers don't have any bids at this current moment, and then 25% of the unemployed young people are illegal, ignorant migrants?
No. What I'm saying is these problems exist now for migrant workers. What I'm about to get to is that your policy makes things worse for them. And remember that they're still members of Slovenian society, and Slovenians still care about them, even if they don't have the chance to vote. What this does is, sure, this makes things better for the Slovenian middle class and the Slovenian rich. It moves them up a bit. But these migrant workers stay right here. In fact, they even go down. Because now, there's no real reason for a Slovenian worker to work a nasty job, like cleaning the sewers. Because they can fall back on this new money they're being handed. But a migrant worker never has the opportunity to do this. Migrant workers will always now be forced by your policy into the worst possible jobs in society. But I don't know about you, but is this a country you really want? Do you want to live in a country that builds a happy city on the bones and the labor of people like Alamir and people who will never get a chance to have their voices heard in society? If you're happy with walking on their skulls, then by all means agree with them. But if you want a world that doesn't simply prey upon whoever they can, then agree with us. Because we stand for a society that at least tries to help everyone. That at least tries to help people who may not have a vote and may not have a powerful voice. That's why you should oppose this policy. Thank you.
I'm taking temperature one last time before the end. How many people are undecided? But a lot of you, yes. This is actually good news as far as I'm concerned. You know, before I said, I hope you'll be able to make up your mind. This is making up your mind, so I apologize for that. Because what they've just revealed is this depth and the scope of the problem. so we can all understand your position. Who thinks that UBI is a, is a way to solve the problem they're discussing, the great disparity? A number of you, yeah, but a minority. Who is against it? More people than in favor. All right, we kind of know where we stand right now, so I'm calling the government whip, Dylan, to close the case for the government side.
Where I'm from, if you're poor, you're fucked. I'm sorry. It's funny now. It's funny in this auditorium. It's not funny when your parents have been living on welfare for 10 years and you have to go to a shitty school in an awful neighborhood where teachers don't care about you because they're not paid enough. We need to get kids out of those situations. That is what we're trying to do on our side of the bench. That is what universal basic income will do for you. Jacob stood up and he told you, he characterized our argument that we want people to run for president so that poverty will get fixed. No, that's not what Luke told you, and I know you people are better than to assume this straw man that Jacob just willy-nilly tossed out. Okay, frankly, what we're telling you is that when more people are making more money, those more people will be able to not worry about basic needs as much. They will not have to worry about where in the hell am I going to get milk tomorrow? Where am I going to get bread? No thank you, I'll take you later. They're not thinking about these things, so what they're able to do is focus on where information that they get comes from. They're able to focus on who is telling me what, how can I decide the best way to get out of the situation? And I'm going to get into a little more strongly how this is the best way to have greater access to democracy. That is what we tell you on this side of the house today. But first, a little bit of rebuttal. So what we tell you is that, right, so I already told you that people will, after they buy bread, find a way to sustain themselves. They're going to get out of poverty more easily because they're going to get out of poverty more easily because they're not worried about these short-term consequences. Yeah.
Even if we assume that they can elect politicians which can defend them, what is going to prevent Juan what is going to give Juan the political decision he wants if there is heavy lobbying and super PACs from the elites which prevent political decisions to be made?
I don't think that the divide between the impoverished in any nation and the immigrant population in that same nation is as strong as they make it out to be. I think that impoverished people who are citizens and impoverished people who are not citizens have one thing in common, and that is that they are getting screwed by their government and screwed by large corporations. That is why they will be able to identify, and that is with these immigrants, and that is why they will be able to make their vote count, not only for themselves, but with people who they care about. That's why you'll be able to fix the immigrant problem. Moving on to my substantive matter. So how do we get people out, or moving on to a way of how I wrap this case up, excuse me. So how do we get people out of hopelessness? In a world where we have UBI, because this weight comes off your back, you have the ability to rise in society, vote more and participate. This is what my partner told you. This means that you are able to get your kids into a better school. There is less of a cycle of poverty, which is the problem that we see right now, which is that not only are the same people poor, not only are there lots of poor people, but it's the same people from generation to generation coming from the same families who will remain poor. When you have more money and you're able to send your kid to school, you'll be able to rise out of poverty more easily. I'll take back half.
How can you tell us that this UBI will somehow allow people to invest in things like stocks, invest in education, invest in other ways to get skills, to get better jobs, when all you're doing is throwing money at them and expecting them to do something with it? It's going to help them in the long run.
Because we believe that people who are impoverished aren't just silly. We think that in the majority of cases, they will be able to sure, Jacob told you that their first concern is how are they going to buy cereal, how are they going to buy bread. But after that, they're going to make more decisions because they're not going to be perpetually concerned with these same problems. In a world where UBI exists, there's going to be in a world where UBI exists, because we're spending less on a bureaucracy, we're going to be able to be giving more in the tax money that gets taken in to poor people. Okay, so because they're making more money, because they're able to rise out of the situations that they find themselves in, it means that they're able to get the corporations who buy American elections off of their back. Because the only situation where people can actually make political change happen is when they participate in a real democracy. And they have real elections where they're not concerned with where their next meal is coming from, and they actually have enough weight off of their back to be able to consider which candidate is the best for them, which might be lying to them, etc. And the political process, even if it doesn't reform overnight because no one's running for president, the political process over time will reform itself. Because we give people the ability to have more agency in their personal lives, and because we think that these people are able to empathize with immigrants who are going to be sharing their situation, who currently share their situation in any nation, we think that it is a really good idea to have universal basic income. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan, for a fine concluding speech, and inviting Remy to conclude the case for the side opposition.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks to all the debaters for the speeches. Okay, what I'm going to do for you is sum up this debate in two different ideas that we can think about, and I'm going to show you how the arguments that Jacob and I, that Teo and Petra brought you from opposition, actually take down a lot of the things we hear coming out of government, and show you why we shouldn't have universal basic income, how it's actually going to be worse off, it's going to make people worse off than it does in the status quo. So here's the first idea. Let's talk about if universal basic income helps impoverish people. And then secondly, I'm going to talk to you about whether or not this is good for society and whether or not we do get benefits from it, like they try to tell you. So the first idea, does universal basic income help impoverish people? So we hear ideas on the government side. We hear from the first team this idea that it raises the quality of life and that alone is a reason to support it. However, on our side of the house, we tell you that the slight raise in money isn't actually going to change other problems. We'll tell you that that's not how we address real problems like discrimination and stereotypes, and the idea that Teo brought to you about how politics won't actually result in change from this because rich people still control things. So we tell you that just throwing money, just throwing €500 or $500 at people isn't going to allow them to actually change anything, and it's going to keep them in the situations the government side and opposition side want to allow them to escape. So we tell you that just throwing money at it and raising their quality of life just a little bit isn't going to get real change for people who are impoverished. So we tell you that we don't think you're going to get benefits for these people. We also hear this idea on government that it closes the income gap. No, thank you. It closes the income gap between rich people and poor people, and that will solve injustices that happen between those classes. However, Teo and Petra told you how the very, very rich are still going to get richer under this situation. We tell you that all it does is raise everyone up a little bit, but still allows rich people to be better off and still allows them to control things in politics and to control things in society because they'll still have an advantage of having more money. So tell you we don't actually close the income gap. We still have a lot of the problems between rich people and poor people. No, thank you. Lastly, we hear this idea from government where they tell you that people are able to participate in politics and that this is good and participation will be great and now they can change things about their lives that they want. However, Jake and I tell you this isn't likely at all. We tell you that people who are immigrants and can't participate aren't going to see any change in their favor. Teo and Petra also tell you that even if impoverished people do vote, they're still unlikely to get change in politics because of the way that rich people control lots of elections, because of super PACs in the recent elections with Romney and Obama, and because of the way the European laws are being revoked because of the influence of big industries. So we tell you, even if they do participate in politics, which Jacob and I think is very unlikely, we don't think that they're going to actually be able to pass policies that help them, and we don't think that they're going to get any kind of change. So when addressing this idea, one second. when addressing this idea of whether or not universal basic income helps impoverish people. With Jacob and I think that up and down the opposition bench, we've given you lots of good examples as to why this won't actually help them, why this actually causes more problems than it does benefits for these people, and how they can't actually escape the kind of poverty that neither side of the house wants to see. Luke, go ahead.
Isn't it better for these impoverished people if they have some kind of say over what rich person is actually running the country?
Yeah, we think that even in the status quo, you can have poor people being paid attention to in politics. We don't think that's not anything we're seeing right now. We see that, yes, politicians do have to appeal to people. Like, people in the US are appealing to Latinos and Hispanics because they're now a big voting bloc, even if they're not the richest part of society. So we don't see this kind of like idea that they're going to be more involved and all of a sudden be able to change things in politics. We don't see this as very likely. We also see a little bit in the status quo already. So you don't get that on your side of the house, and that's not an argument that really is going to get lots of benefits for people. Okay, let's look at the second theme. Is this good for society? Is this going to be beneficial? Because if it is, then this is something that we should do. However, we tell you that it's not. We tell you this causes more problems than it does solve any kind of problems in society. So we hear from the government side that wealth inequality creates social injustice, and that this will solve it. UBI will solve the social injustice that's caused by wealth inequality. However, we don't see that this solves social justice in any way. What we've told you from our side of the house is that it does the opposite, is that it covers up the problem. Teo brought you this idea of hush money, and how all we're doing is covering up the problem so people will think that it's been solved for. So we tell you, when people think that the problem has been solved, because now these people have money, now they have a universal basic income, we tell you that's going to stop any change, and that's going to stop any kind of progress we need to see happening, like in politics, or in society as a whole. So we tell you all this does is cover up the problem and doesn't actually lead to change in the future for people who are impoverished and who do need help changing stereotypes and discrimination. Lastly, we get this idea that like people will participate more, this is great, and people are going to be able to raise their quality of life and not have to like be beholden to certain types of cereal. However, we tell you that we don't think it's right to take programs away that specifically target the things that impoverished people need. We tell you these government programs are specifically designed to help people, specifically designed to give them skills that UBI just can't do. So what have I told you? We looked at the two themes, whether UBI helps impoverished people and whether it's good for society. And because we tell you no to both things, we've given you lots of examples and lots of reasons why. This is why we believe we shouldn't impose universal basic income, and this is not the way to get out of a hopeless situation. So for all these reasons, we'd like to ask you to vote opposition. Thank you, everyone, for a great debate and for coming.
For a nice, entertaining, thought-provoking debate, I guess. What's the situation right now? How many of us are undecided? Oh, many fewer. Who's in favor of UBI? More people. Because you're against UBI. Okay. Well, things are changing. Glad to see that. Now's the time for comments, opinions, questions. I don't want to monopolize the floor.